The Middle Ages. Kings and queens hosting lavish balls, knights saving princesses, and glorious castles filled to the brim with tapestries and elaborate portraits. The true time to live in. Those who believe this, though, are far from right. The Middle Ages was nothing but gloom-ridden and dreadful. Famine and war brought pain and suffering to everyone in Europe, but nothing was as bad as the Black Plague. Mostly everyone during the Middle Ages was either a farmer, craftsperson, serf, or lucky government official. They did their job and searched for food. Religion was highly regarded because mostly everything on a day-to-day basis was controlled by the Catholic Church. And once it was time for bed, everyone went home to a filthy house that was poorly built. The houses of people in the Middle Ages were uninhabitable. They were terribly structured with the potential threat of falling down, not to mention the dirt and bacteria lingering inside. Feces could have been even found from the rats and tiny animals crawling about. For some houses, even farm animals rested with the humans. With no floor or glass for a window, cold breezes swept through during the winter, and the smoke from the fire located inside the house brought haze and could cause an asthma attack to occur in just seconds. Additionally, people living in these houses barely bathed. They would wear clothes for weeks without cleaning them. Baths were last resorts, and with no sewer or toilet, streets were used to discard waste. Working in the Middle Ages was also tough. Wages were low and the price of goods were skyrocketing. Work was hard to find, and when one did have a job, it was very laborious. While many commoners in the Middle Ages had hard lives, serfs had it even worse. They were nearly slaves, working to end their debt. It was an inescapable circuit. Serfdom was not uncommon in Europe, though. Serfdom allowed inequality to escalate and took advantage of those who were weak and powerless. When someone in the Middle Ages got sick, medical knowledge would be limited. Most medical knowledge was based on the philosophies of two important scientists, Galen and Avicenna. Galen came up with the idea that the human body consisted of 4 humors, while Avicenna connected human anatomy to astrology. Clearly, both ideas were misleading, causing medical knowledge during medieval times to be quite incorrect. Additionally, at the time, there was not a lot of medical schools. Knowledge about infectious diseases were limited, and even worse, human dissections were most of the time forbidden. This ensured that medical progress would not advance. Surgery was rarely done, and bleeding patients out was a well-approved method of curing someone with a disease. Physicians had bizarre cures and methods which were far from helpful. This was life in the Middle Ages. It may have been tough, but no one had a clue of what was yet to come. The Black Plague. The Black Plague was the term used to describe the pandemic during the mid-1300s, from around the year 1347 to about 1352. During this time, no life was spared. Everyone was in danger, and once infected, you would not live to see another week. From London to Paris, towns all across of Europe and parts of Asia suffered, stretching from Madrid to Russia to Norway to Sicily. Many theories pose answers to the question of why it was called the Black Plague. Some say it was because of the fact that victims had swollen lymph nodes that were black, while others say because some tongues turned black once infected. But where did this deadly epidemic come from? Central Asia. Heard of Marco Polo? Well, his trade route promoted trade and travel. However, it also brought consequences. The bacteria Yersinia pestis, originally causing the plague of Justinian, was brought along this route, and that same bacteria, Yersinia pestis, caused the Black Plague. Early Mongols traveling along this route spread the bacteria to Kaffa, Italy, which in turn prompted the start to the whole outbreak. From Kaffa, the plague spread north. Once someone in a town was infected, everyone else would be a potential victim. During the Black Plague, the bacteria lived on small mammals such as rats and squirrels. Later, fleas bit these creatures, which allowed Yersinia pestis to infect their body systems. As the infected flea bit humans, the plague was spread. The Black Plague killed about 1/3 of Europe's population, estimating at about 25 million people. Farmers, kings, merchants, everyone, everywhere. As the Black Plague spread, trade discontinued, leaving many even unable to travel. With no trade, the economy went down. Religion, which was one of the most important things at the time, was now being questioned. Soon, chaos caused by religious misunderstanding lingered in the minds of many. By the end of the plague, the whole Catholic Church was falling apart, similar to the culture of many countries. As populations of plague-infected victims were ruined, so were cultures. Once lively and festive parties turned into funerals for the dead. Art and literature became morbid and gloomy. One can clearly see a significant change in moods between the art and literature before and during the Black Plague. Art depicting skeletons, corpses, and devils are commonly seen, just as illustrations of death choosing people to die is frequently depicted. Furthermore, music during the time was very low on a musical scale, pitch-wise, having a dark and sad mood and tone. Songs and books were written about death and the Black Plague. Daily life was also affected. Naturally, the daily life of everybody varied by who you were. Because the lucky few who would be so fortunate enough to survive would do anything to live their last few days to the fullest, they spent their happy, joyful days in expensive silks, dining on flavorful meals. They threw parties and enjoyed their lives until they were taken by the plague. Others spent their days tending to sick family members or burying the hundreds of lives lost daily. No matter what your day typically consisted of, life was uncivilized and disorderly. Crime was frequent, and the government of many countries fell so apart that rules and laws were barely regarded. People who were victims of the Black Plague had less than a week of surviving once they were infected. Symptoms included swollen lymph nodes that turned black in the groin, armpit, or neck, fever, chills, headache, fatigue, and muscle aches. During the Black Plague, physicians popped boo-boos and bled patients. Certain fruits and herbs were banned, while others were carried around daily. There was not much for physicians to do, and some methods increased the likelihood of some patients receiving the plague. In other words, physicians were useless. Finally, after years of killing men, women, and children, the Black Plague ended in autumn in the 1350s. The cold autumn air killed off many of the fleas that were helping spread the Black Plague, and suddenly a world filled with fear and pain was now lost. How would they recover from such a disastrous few years? While in the beginning answers loomed as a punishment from God, some began to realize that the poor living conditions aided in the spread of the plague. This realization caused many to change their past actions. Soon governments promoted cleanliness and regulated sanitation. Streets and public areas would be made sure clean, and some towns even hired street cleaners. Farm animals even stopped living with the people in their houses, and as living conditions improved, people began to live longer lives. There is even a study from skeletons during this time that proved that the diets and cleanliness of people during this time improved. The Black Plague put an end to serfdom as well. The millions of deaths and labor shortage freed serfs and allowed them to search for jobs with higher wages. Soon the system that bounded serfs had ended. It caused great triumph. Medical knowledge was also changing. Autopsies that were forbidden were now commonly used as a way to better understand the human body. Physicians were rethinking disease. The idea of microorganisms and separating the ill from the healthy were adapted as well. Even more, the Black Plague pushed medical knowledge to advance so much that the ideas created then are used today. Hospitals that were mainly used to hold the sick and dying were now being visited by physicians who until then did not come to cure anyone. The deaths of many caused a labor shortage. This initially helped peasants gain an advantage towards their landlords. Because there was a struggle for landlords to find work, peasants bargained and received higher wages. In accordance to a study conducted by Phillips, Brown, and Hopkins, daily wages of skilled building workers in southern England increased by 66% from 1340 to 1390. The Black Plague may or may not be well known in history, but one thing is for sure, it had a big impact. It was a tragedy for the few people alive during the time. So many deaths, at what cost? But the Black Plague allowed all of Europe to be greater, to advance. The deaths of thousands was the price paid for saving the lives of millions. Millions of people in the future. Their lives would be greater because of the path paved by the Black Plague. It is hard to think about what life would be like today without the Black Plague. Would we continue to live in terrible living conditions? Would serfdom arise in the United States? Would life be similar to the Great Depression, with wages so low that the income of a family is not enough to even support one person? Would the medical knowledge of Galen and Avicenna be what medical knowledge is still based on? Would it still be based on astrology? As mentioned previously, it is hard to know. While these questions linger in the minds of historians, it is very certain that life would be very different than it is today without the Black Death in our past. Living conditions, which were improved by Europeans after the Black Plague, improved not only their day-to-day lives, but the future. They set the standards. Medical knowledge would not be advanced and accepting to changes. While it can be said that the Black Plague was tragic, deadly, and catastrophic, it was indeed necessary. The Black Plague was the catalytic impact that sparked change.